The crisis on the southern border is all political and entirely fake. The illegals swarming the border may be migrants, but they are not immigrants, refugees, or asylum seekers. See how defining the category of migrant that is coming here leads to a solution to the immigration problem in this episode of The 10th Man. 2.5 million illegals have crossed America's southern border each year since Joe Biden became president. Those 5 million people are the equivalent of the population of Minnesota, one for every citizen of the nation of Norway or New Zealand, either one. They say they're immigrants. They say they are refugees and asylum seekers. If they were in any of these categories, however, we would know how to deal with them. The fact that no one agrees on how to treat them, that some want to put them in hotels and others want a wall to keep them out, shows that the entire situation has been misidentified. The people coming are not immigrants. Immigrants are people who come, usually as a family, and settle permanently in a country. Immigrants come voluntarily and enter peacefully according to a nation's immigration laws. Every nation has immigration laws to make sure the systems are not overburdened and that the admissions process is fair. People who enter the country by sneaking in and evading the border enforcement officers are clearly avoiding the immigration system. Such people can't be immigrants. The migrants are not asylum seekers. People seeking asylum are those who are being personally discriminated against in their home country. The government is looking for them, and their civil rights, including their freedom and even their lives, may be in danger. Some examples are Julian Assange, who fled indictment in the US, or Salman Rushdie, fleeing a fatwa in Iran. As with immigrants, asylum seekers too must apply for asylum to determine their eligibility, which is judged on a case-by-case basis. Although a group may be targeted, like the Jews during the Holocaust, there is no group asylum. Eligibility is still determined on an individual basis. Millions crossing illegally claim to be seeking asylum, but of the tens of thousands of asylum hearings conducted, only 2% have found to have merit. Other tens of thousands of migrants have been granted hearings but failed to appear. Without a hearing and a positive outcome, there's no asylum, and they are illegal aliens wasting the American taxpayers' money. The illegals could be refugees, but only if dangerous conditions in their home country are driving them to leave it, seeking safety elsewhere, and only if they have nowhere closer to go than the United States. True refugees are treated in accordance with global standards when they reach the host country. Most of the illegals come from Central America. The 4 Central American countries, Nicaragua, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, are 4 countries linked not just by culture, but by treaty. The Central America 4 Border Control Agreement, like the Schengen Agreement in Europe, allows the citizens of these 4 adjoining nations free passage across their borders with no restrictions. They need travel nowhere else for asylum, let alone walk 3,000 miles just to reach the American border. If the freedom to enter 3 other countries at will is still too limiting, there is the Cartagena Declaration on Refugees. Signed in 1984, it establishes the right to seek refuge in 14 countries in South and Central America. Safety in any of these countries would be a shorter journey than the trip to America. The treaty has a broader and more generous definition of refugee status than does the United Nations, and many of the fraudulent applications in the United States would be accepted in Latin America under Cartagena. Indeed, there is significant cross-border traffic in South America of legitimate refugees from failed states like Venezuela, fleeing to Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, Brazil, and Chile. Oddly, the U.S. then receives fraudulent refugees from those very same host countries. Clearly, the illegals have other places they could find refuge, and much closer to home. Migrants are refugees only if conditions are poor in their home countries. But safety is not the reason for the long trip, at least according to the Global Peace Index. The Institute for Economics and Peace in Sydney, Australia, is the source of the Global Peace Index, a rating system used by the United Nations to evaluate the safety of every nation on Earth. Many popular news magazines use its results to showcase the best places to live, visit, and retire. If you are in Central America, however, the Global Peace Index tells you to stay there. The United States is considered less safe than any country in Central America as of 2022. To reach America, the illegals pass through Mexico, one of the most dangerous countries in the Western Hemisphere. Apart from the Global Peace Index, travel agents too list Guatemala as generally safe, and 500,000 tourists agree. Clearly, these migrants are not refugees. True refugees look very different from the illegals in America. In camps like Za'atari in Jordan, every Syrian refugee family fleeing the civil war is allowed to stay and live in a family shelter. With the help of the UN, the Syrians have established a community, a home in another land. Native teachers set up classrooms for the children, sparing them the trauma of immersion learning in the host countries. A business district bustles with native merchants plying their trades, producing native foods in hundreds of shops. With 40 babies born each week, the community is humble yet thriving. The refugees may apply for asylum, but few of them do so. They are waiting for peace to return to their homeland, at which time they will return as well. Compare that to the military-age men coming to America. Where are the families among these travelers from the South? Where are the teachers, bakers, and merchants? True refugees would demand a place they could call their own, where they could care for their families and where they could raise some of their own food or earn money in traditional ways. They would demand a community, not a base camp for day laborers sending money home. But most illegals in the U.S. are coming not out of fear in their homeland, but for money. Since the migrants coming to America are not immigrants, or tourists or refugees, they must be something else. They are colonizers. They come not to settle, but are sent by their homeland to send money back home. Remittances from illegals are the largest source of foreign trade for the Central American countries, and the U.S. is the largest source of remittances in the world. For the illegal immigrants, it is all about money. But remittances are not the only money being sent back to the home country. There is also drug money. The British Empire famously smuggled opium into China in the 19th century. Britain had nothing to offer in trade that the Chinese wanted. So, the English set up a network of drug smugglers and dealers protected by armed troops and supplied them from opium farms which they ran in their Indian colonies. Nowadays, the Chinese who learned from the British are producing the chemical feedstocks used to make fentanyl and shipping them to Mexico. There, the drug is made and then sold in the United States using a network of armed Mexican distributors. China and Mexico get rich, while, in the U.S., fentanyl has been the leading killer of young adults since 2019, just like opium killed thousands of Chinese. Americans die because the border is not secure. It is not just Jordan in the Middle East that manages its refugees according to law. Look at some Western nations, like Canada. Migrants travel thousands of miles across America to reach Minnesota, Maine, and Vermont, but will not walk another mile into Canada. That's because anyone entering Canada illegally is put into a detention facility. Canada has around 8,000 asylum seekers in detention. 20% of them, the overflow, are housed in the provincial prisons, not in hotels like in the U.S. The United Kingdom is another nation that enforces its immigration laws. In 2023, the UK cracked down on small boats full of people who crossed the English Channel to reach shore in England, disappearing into the countryside. Now, under British law, people who enter this way, numbering 45,000 in 2022, can be detained and deported. If deported, they are banned from ever returning. Their policy, although the United Nations has blocked it, sends illegals out of the country to Africa for processing. In Australia, likewise, any foreigner in the country without a valid visa is illegal and is detained. If he arrives without a visa or stays after his visa expires, he goes to jail, whether man or woman, adult or child. Australia has created detention camps on distant islands, and detainees have been known to spend up to 10 years there. As a result of their practices, Australia spends less than $1 billion a year on their illegal immigrants, a fraction of the burden to American taxpayers. Australia, Canada, and the UK are all rated as much more peaceful than the United States by the Global Peace Index. Canada ranks 12th, Australia 27th, and the United Kingdom 34th among all nations. Even Jordan, home of the Za'atari camp, ranks in the top 100 as 57th. The United States, with its open borders and admission of more refugees than all other nations combined, ranks 129th. Clearly, allowing illegal migrants to scoff at America's laws earns for America only disdain in the global community. The solution to the migrant problem is demonstrated by 4 other countries: Jordan, Canada, Australia, and the UK. The United States could simply start enforcing international immigration law, and illegal immigration will stop. We have coddled millions of invaders infiltrating under darkness and bringing crime, disease, and drugs. The world has not mistaken our poor judgment for kindness. The global community sees it for what it is: political maneuver and a lack of self-respect. Other countries give charity to the deserving, and that's all America needs to do. All America needs to do is follow the law. A nation that does not respect its own laws is despised in the world community. A nation that does not protect its borders is no nation at all.